Hey, this is Revisiting the Mania, a Wrestlemania rewatch podcast. But today is going to be a little bit different because people have requested for Maria to watch the Montreal Screw Job, and we're going to do a bonus episode about it. I'm Carlos.
And I'm the showstopper, the main event, the icon.
You're Shawn Michaels?
I'm Maria.
Oh. All right. So this is a very controversial match. This took place in a non-WrestleMania event, Survivor Series of 1997. Even though we did just finish WrestleMania 14, which was in 1998,
Yes.
I decided to let's go ahead and go into the future, but let's bring it also into the past since we have to get this. We have to give our subscribers and our viewers something during the Thanksgiving break until our next podcast goes up for WrestleMania 15
Yes.
on Saturday, November 25th.
My favorite number. I can't wait to revisit that WrestleMania.
Yeah, so let's get started here.
Yes, I mean, we're in it's not a WrestleMania. This is Survivor Series.
Yes, Survivor Series of 1997. Now, we haven't introduced you into a Survivor Series.
Mm-mm.
You've only been watching WrestleMania.
That's right.
So Survivor Series was pretty much like it had like either 3 or 4 events.
Okay.
Where there were these teams,
yes,
quote unquote teams of 4 or 5 superstars, and it's based like pretty much out here, Survivor.
Right.
So whoever's left standing is a team that wins.
Ooh.
But most of my recollection, none of these had any type of stakes. It was just like for bragging rights, I guess you could say.
Okay, so it's not like it's for a title.
No, it's not a shot
for belt.
No,
a suitcase full of cash.
No.
Okay, tell me more.
No, I mean that was basically it.
Oh.
So did you saw the first match of a traditional Survivor Series match?
Yes.
In that 1997 one. What did you think about the Survivor Series setup?
The setup, I thought the setup was pretty cool. But compared to WrestleMania, I was surprised and not surprised at the draw of the crowd because it was a full house in that stadium. So I thought the matches were decent matches, but it didn't bring the excitement that a WrestleMania has brought me. So what do you think about it?
I've never been a great fan of the Survivor Series like format. Like I understand the whole thing, team surviving, blah blah blah. But I never felt like it had any type of stakes to it.
Okay.
Whereas like WrestleMania, you had like number one contendership matches for titles,
Right.
or when WrestleMania 4, when we had that whole tournament to crown a new heavyweight championship or champion.
So Survivor Series, is it a little bit like the Hunger Games?
Kind of, but it's not like the last person ends up getting a contract or anything like that.
Okay, so it's not as exciting. Well,
No.
I don't say as exciting as the Hunger Games, but it's not like for anything. But it is for bragging rights, right?
I guess just to say that your team beat the other team.
But I mean, that's what I don't want to say fighting or playing or participating is all about. Is like who's the best, who's gonna win.
Yeah.
So the WWF roster is pretty thin by 1996.
Yeah, 96, 97, and 98, it starts getting a little bit thin, but go on.
And for all of those that are like super interested in some details about the Montreal
Screw Job,
Cultaholic does a great job laying out the timeline of what was happening to the WWF and WCW at that time. So after you watch us, I recommend that you watch them if you're interested in a fully detailed and a really good layout of things that happened during that time in the WWF and WCW timeline.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a young Bret. Bret was 38, 39 years old. And he was meeting with McMahon to sign a new deal, but deferred signing it.
Well, he did sign it at first after they managed to get the deal done.
Okay.
So Bret initially signed like a 20-year deal It was gonna be like either 3 or 4 years of him being an active wrestler
Okay.
for like either 1.5 or $2 million,
Right.
and then the rest of it would have been like he's an advisor or like maybe some guy who books the matches or things like that.
Hmm.
And then the last either 3 or 4 years were gonna be him as a legend. Like he goes out as an ambassador or signs autographs for like I think it was like 250 or 200,000.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but because of the money that Vince is losing,
Okay.
because of the I wouldn't say poachings, but like all the free agents like Kevin Nash, who was Diesel, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall,
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan,
Hulk.
Randy Macho Man Savage,
Hmm.
Lex Luger leaves.
Wow.
So he's losing all this big name talent, even though I was okay with everyone leaving except for probably Nash, Hall, and Macho Man, but that's just me. But you know, everyone built has Vince has built up all these people as big main event stars, and now you're like, holy crap! Now they're all over here on WCW, and so all the eyes are going there,
Right.
and Vince is losing money. So he goes to Bret, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to pay you this.
Hmm.
I'm gonna need you to scale it back. Can we redo this?" And Bret's like, "No, we can't. If you're not gonna be able to honor your contract, I'm leaving."
Right.
And so this triggers a clause in Bret Hart's contract where he has creative control of his character for the last 30 days that he's gonna be there.
Right.
So he wouldn't get like have a bad image or anything like embarrassing happen to him before he heads off into whatever new venture it is.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, you're doing a really good job at setting the stage of what was going on in 1996 and 1997.
mhm.
So we're talking about this main, um, not the main event. Would you consider it the main
Well,
event?
this was the main event of the Survivor Series.
Okay.
So
So it's Bret Hart versus
Shawn
Shawn
Michaels
Michaels.
for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship.
And
N-
let's not forget that Bret Hart is billed from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
yes,
So, I mean, he's in his home country.
right, and that's primarily I think why it was packed. Everyone likes to see the hometown hero come out,
Yeah.
and they don't do like a lot of special events or shows in Canada. Well, especially back then. Maybe now it's a lot more frequent.
Okay.
But back then, there wasn't that much of traveling into the Great White North for particular shows like that.
I find it interesting that they're both about 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Shawn Michaels is like 6 feet 1 inch.
Mm-hmm.
Brad is 235 pounds, and Shawn's about 227 pounds. They're
Mm-hmm.
about the same weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then who do we get to see as far as, do we have announcers?
The announcers are this time Jerry the King Lawler and good old JR Jim Ross.
That's right.
Right. So Vince, he had announced at the previous WrestleMania.
Hmm.
So there's been speculation that Vince didn't do this particular announcing on this event because he was still working on Bret to do the right thing,
Hmm.
which we normally do or had done
Right.
previously when you were leaving the territory
Okay.
or you were leaving the business. You lost on your way out. That
Wow.
was your way to say goodbye and uplift the next talent, because that's basically what it was. It was like a passing of the torch.
Right.
So except for in this instance, the guy who's leaving did not want to pass the torch to Shawn.
So we know that the backstory is that they don't have a good history.
Yeah.
They don't get along.
Right.
I mean, they've had pretty treacherous wrestling matches before.
Mm-hmm.
Some pretty spicy things that have been said inside and outside of the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Some stuff really hitting home, personally. So, what did you think about the set up as far as them going toe to toe during this last match for Bret? Do you think it could have been anybody else in the WWF at that time? Who would you have preferred? Like a what if?
Looking at the talent, I think at this point in time, because I'm looking at the card,
Okay.
I think it would have been too early to give it to Stone Cold.
Oh.
You have I'm looking and I don't see anyone here that I probably would have been okay with them giving the belt to, because Undertaker's not on this card,
Okay.
so that would have been one of them. So he might have been hurt.
I think Undertaker wasn't on this card, but he was definitely behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, he
we get
probably
to
would
visit
have been
some
hurt, but
stories.
he probably just wasn't like ring ready.
Okay.
You know, he could have been like street fight ready, but
Mm,
not ring ready.
right.
So, and maybe Owen Hart probably would have been a good one, because I've always felt that he was the king of hearts. He was the best of them.
You know what? Now that you're saying that, if Owen Hart was still part of WWF at this
He
time,
was.
then I think that would have been an excellent match. And this is just me kind of like spitballing.
Yeah.
But I think that Bret would have taken that loss to his brother.
Yeah.
Basically welcoming his brother in.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been the perfect way to end that WWF career, because he wasn't really interested in leaving the WWF.
No, he had been there since WrestleMania 2, a little bit earlier. So WrestleMania 2 was 1986.
Yeah, from everything that I've seen and everything that I've read, it seems like Bret was pretty loyal to the WWF. And when he saw that the terms of his contract had changed, that's what kind of threw him for a loop and made him move to this decision. So that was,
everyone was getting sweet deals, you know, like when you're on the road, and at this point in time, it's Bret started in 1976,
right.
So we're in 1997. So we're looking at him being already wrestling for 21 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
So he is in his twilight, technically, back then of his career. Now we have more wrestlers going into their 40s and 50s and 60s.
Right.
And maybe even 70s if Ric Flair gets another match in it, now that he's joined AEW.
Woo!
But you know, Bret wasn't thinking like that. He was thinking about, you know, I've worked long enough. This is what's due to me, and then I can go.
Country.
Yeah, and especially if you think about it, if he's signing that 20-year contract like at 40,
right,
he's setting himself up for a nice long retirement. He's like, I only have to wrestle 3 or 4 more years, and then the rest of it's gravy.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I agree with you, and like those what if situations, I think the perfect way to kind of like simmer down his career here, since he decided to leave, would have been a him and his brother match, to transition his brother into like that next stepping stone for the WWF.
Right.
Wow.
I think that probably would have been the best bet. But
I think so. But
I think this is, we'll get to one of our first banners here.
Okay.
So let's visit this. Do you think Vince screwed Bret?
Do I think it? After I've done the reading, done the watching, also watched like the one-on-one interviews, I do feel like that. I feel like it was spiteful. And then we also have like that what if situation. I forget who it is during the interviews that we watched that is like, Bret knew that this was part of the plan. He knew that this was part of the storyline, and he was kind of in on it. So you get like the,
I think you're talking about Scott Hall on the
Scott
Dark
Hall?
Side of the Ring, season 1, episode 2.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that, and many superstars have come out and said that it was all a work. You know, like it, which means a work means like, it's all part of the story. It's all about the kayfabe. If you have some listeners or viewers that aren't familiar with wrestling, this is all part of the story, and they were all in on it, is what this one wrestler, Scott Hall, said in that interview at Dark Side of the Ring. But right now, based on all the evidence that we've seen, you've read, you saw the Dark Side of the Ring and that cultaholic thing, are you saying that you believe that this is not a work, this was a shoot, which means it was real life, not scripted, that Vince screwed Bret?
Okay. So,
I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot. You're more than welcome to.
You're not like, so let's talk. I just have to, I was thinking about what can I compare this to? Like a multi-level chess game where you have like, those 3 tiers. You have this first level, the second level, and then that third level. The third level is ideal, like the ideal is kind of like idealistic, where it's like, oh, we as an audience, as fans, wish that was a storyline. So I would love to think that that was part of the work, the kayfabe, the story, and that everybody was in on it. But just going over how things were going for the WWF in 1996 through 97. They're losing all these major stars. We have this person that's invested in the company, loyal to the company, and then they're like, well, I'd like to lose in this way if it's going to be to Shawn Michaels.
Right. And I think we've gone through this where everyone's been talking about how Bret would not lose to Shawn. He did not want to give up the belt to Shawn.
Right. So we know, like, knowing that and knowing that history and knowing how he feels about Shawn, I like to say that did Vince screw Bret? I think he did.
Yeah, I think it's just all like I'm in agreement that Vince had his part in screwing Bret.
Right.
We had gone through this whole little tangent where who could it have been?
Mm-hmm.
So Undertaker was unable to due to injury. Owen Hart probably would have been the best one, but the way he has been booked, we saw WrestleMania 13 where he had that submission match with Stone Cold.
Right.
And even though he did win, it wasn't like the most credible wins because Stone Cold technically doesn't tap out.
Yeah.
And Bret Hart is technically the submission guy. That's his move, the sharpshooter. And the guy the guy did not quit. He didn't pass out.
No.
He passed out. So how does that make? How do you think that makes a wrestler feel? That's his whole thing. He's a technical wrestler. He's a submission master.
I like that you talk about that because that just lends to Bret Hart's, like, I don't know if it's called like a wrestling finesse, but like his wrestling repertoire of how great of a wrestler he is, how he does, like, the technical moves, how proud he is of being, and I'm not saying that Shawn isn't. I'm not.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just setting up a character, building that character for Bret.
Yeah, and he's been building that character for over 20 years.
Exactly that. And part of his storyline towards the last part of WWF is including him being kind of bratty.
Yeah, bratty, whiny, kind of like a male, what we would say Karen. And just complaining about like how he deserves to be in the spotlight. And that's the thing what I've been trying to say. It's like did Vince did screw Bret, but I also said that Bret screwed Bret. Because he also agreed to these type of characterisms or like these mannerisms for his character to have.
He did, and he talks about it because he's like, I don't think my fans are going to enjoy me being like this.
But he still went along with it.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows how he was feeling at that time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go along with things and you're like kind of just in it and you're just like going along and then you're like, wait, this is not good. You look back at her. Like,
that's how problems happen.
You're like, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, this has been okay for this long. Like, I'll go with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going with it. And you're like, oh, wait, this sucks.
Right. So in that past 1.5 year, from when Bret lost to Shawn at the WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match to now, his character was not, and to me, in a good light. Mm-hmm. He was coming off as saying he's the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be.
You still are, Bret.
But the way he let his character be portrayed
at
at
that
that time towards the end, like that's why I feel that not only did Vince screw Bret, but it was a Bret screwed Bret too.
So what you're saying is that you
It's a
feel
mutual screwing. They're consenting screwers.
The one thing I didn't think I'd hear during this episode.
Yeah.
So with that said, okay, so I definitely agree with you. So what I'm getting out of that is that you're saying be you, be genuine to yourself, and if it doesn't feel right, don't go with it.
I mean, this is your character. This is their money.
Right.
So you have to fight. Like, especially for like yourself, like as a performer.
Right.
If you know that a certain way that you're acting or a certain catchphrase or a certain move,
Right.
as long as it's safe, is actually getting a reaction from the crowd, whether it's a bad, if you're a heel, or a good response. And the guy's like, yeah, I don't want you to do that no more.
So do you think Stone Cold would be like a good representation of that? Somebody that's kind of like stuck to their guns about who they are as a wrestler or who they are as a character? Like staying true to their character?
Yeah, there is a time where Stone Cold kind of goes like full heel,
Okay.
and we'll eventually get to that.
Ooh.
But I think the one that's kind of been able to like pull it off in the Attitude Era, where they're like, able to transition from face to heel,
Yes,
on a dime, was The Rock.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm like, that's all right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you.
So, we'll go ahead and
So, I mean, let's talk about the match
yeah.
itself. So, Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. The match goes on for 19 minutes and 58 seconds.
Now, I wonder if the 19 minutes is counting like the first, like maybe 5 or 6 minutes when they're fighting outside.
Do you think so?
I don't know. I'd have to time it. I should have timed it to just verify it. But um, when they're plotting and planning this match out,
Yeah.
they are like, yes, let's start outside. Let's not, because of all the bad blood that they've pretty much have built up, whether it was a work part of the story. Some people say, Sean says no, that it was just him antagonizing Bret, but Bret says that it was part of it, and only certain instances when Sean makes references to the possible affair that Bret might have been having with Sonny or things like that. Um, Little jabs that might have been like not actually part of what they agreed to.
What I will say is during an interview with Bret says Sonny. I would say that was probably Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
I'm like, after all these years. So
yeah.
I'm like, the story continues.
Yeah, so they're still going back and forth and can't agree on who was with Sonny. But yeah, so I like the way that this starts off because everyone's aware of it. It's been building up for the past month and a half. And if you do have that bad blood, why not have it start off where they're both going at it like that? And I like that you get like all the kind of quote unquote bigwigs out there. You have Vince out there trying to break it up and convince him to get back in the ring. You see a Pat Patterson sighting, which is like Vince's, right hand man as far as like getting like all the booking and all the matches straightened out and things like that.
Right.
And then you get Gerald Briscoe, which is another guy. But according to like everything that we've watched from that Cultaholic video that Maria mentioned and the Dark Side of the Ring, Briscoe was, I guess, the backdoor guy who got like the shady things done, in particular in this match. So because he's the one that actually tells number one, the ref Earl Hebner, that he has to do the job if he wants to get continue working and keep getting paid.
Earl, yes.
And number two, he's the one that tells Shawn that they have their way out since Bret Hart is not agreeing to drop the title, that he has to put Bret in the sharpshooter. And then at that time, the referee will blow the bell and then get the heck out of Dodge because someone's going to be coming for you.
And that he did. I mean, as soon as that match was over, he took off. He did not look back.
No, even Hunter comes out there to go help him and get out of there.
Yeah, I mean, I would too.
Yeah,
'Cause
but as far as the match is concerned, it's a real good match.
yeah, I think it is.
Like these guys, and I think we've probably hit on this before when we had our friend Raymond on. There's just some guys that have the chemistry,
Right. And they
and
do.
whether it's because they're friends or because they're enemies,
Right.
it just works.
Mhm.
And even though it's like a very bad ending as far as Bret is concerned, it made everything it paid off for the WWF or now E at that point in time
Right.
because it it this might have been maybe like the jumpstart to the attitude area, but I've always been hinting or like pushing that it's been in the making for me from when Shawn Michaels won the Iron Man match back in WrestleMania 12. But
Right.
uh, we get this whole thing. Did you didn't know when this was ending?
No.
But when you saw Bret putting or Shawn getting Bret in the sharpshooter, did you kind of have an inkling besides me telling you that this is it? But like, did you have like anything like this in the pit of my stomach? Because we watched the documentaries afterwards on purpose, so you wouldn't have like this is it
Like when I
moment.
was watching
Yeah.
this match, I mean, it seemed like Bret was pretty strong throughout this
Mhm.
whole match. And I was like, oh, Bret's gonna get this win.
Right.
That's why I followed through the whole thing. So that surprise ending, wow. I
Right.
mean, everyone was stunned. People were shocked.
Yeah, and like even Sean is like there's that audience that we say is the hard cam side,
Hmm.
which is the camera stationary, so
Right.
that doesn't move. That's why it's called the hard cam.
Okay.
So that's the crowd behind the ring
Yes.
that you see. And Sean is actually like going back and forth with like a particular 5, 6 people. And
Wow.
at one point they actually called the security to go over there and get control of it. So it was a very rowdy crowd. It's like everybody
It was a
knew.
really rowdy crowd because I remember there was like, if you watch this match and if you haven't, I would suggest you do because it's just a really solid match to watch. It was one of the most exciting parts about that Survivor series. And also, like Carlos said, that crowd was rowdy. They were
Yeah.
really into it. They were part of it. They were excited. They were getting upset
Mhm.
and rowdy with the wrestling. So definitely watch it. It was definitely worth a
Yeah.
watch.
So we do recommend that you watch it, whether you're brand new to the wrestling or if you if you need to just bone up and weren't aware of all the inner workings of the Montreal Screw Job, and this podcast helped you. First of all, thank you very much for watching. Secondly, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you know when we're going live. Also, if you're listening to us in the audio format, either through Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, what else? Google Podcasts, whatever. Please, not only subscribe and download, but also write a review,
Do us a solid.
please. So as we're winding down here, um,
Can we talk about the fallout?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the fallout from the Montreal Screw Job was immediate.
Yes.
There were people in the background. The Undertaker was very upset. I hear Mick Foley quit for a day and then was lured back in the next day. So people were just not happy.
Yeah, well, it's because it sets a precedent with the locker room. Even though I think even if it wasn't Cornette, it was Bruce Pritchard,
Mhm.
who were both working in the background with Vince,
Right.
that convinced Vince McMahon, to go talk to Bret and try to smooth things over.
Well, can we even
Because
talk about, let's talk about before this. So we have one, an excellent match, two, a terrible ending. Bret standing there looking totally surprised
Mhm.
and I don't want to say broken, but he's just
He's
like,
upset. He's just basically upset that that's not what they agreed on or what he thought that they had agreed on and how that particular match was going to end.
and he like the spit or the spat,
The loogie.
the loogie heard around the wrestling
Oh,
world at
Saw.
that time.
Uh,
Oh man,
eh,
Saw. It was pretty. pretty disgusting. I'm like, did McMahon sign on for that? I can't say that. I mean, did he? I don't think so.
I don't know, because
It was a lot.
everyone's saying that it was all a work. That it was one of those things where everyone had to be in on it because you see everyone there, and why would the boss of the company be out there at ringside for this match if he was not going to be in on it? And that's a very interesting angle that's been brought up by several wrestlers, but in the particular documentary style episode we saw of The Dark Side of the Ring,
right,
where Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, brings it up, he makes a good point. And I don't know who's the one that actually thought of transitioning that particular event to make Vince more prominent, because after this we see Vince quote unquote character coming out more and more on TV.
right.
We get him being that corporate asshole that wants his company run a certain way.
Right.
And his character adds more to the Attitude Era and makes pretty much that whole Attitude Era a little bit better, because everyone in the audience always feels like they're getting screwed by their boss or managers or people above them. And then you had a character, primarily Vince feuded with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
So that's what made people endear more to Stone Cold, because everyone always wanted to stick it to the boss.
Stick it to the man.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, he feels betrayed. He feels disrespected by McMahon. He spits at him. He starts breaking things. He wrecks a couple of equipment pieces, monitors. He's pissed, and wrestlers were pissed in the background too. They were upset.
And then that's where you mentioned that Mankind or Mick Foley leaves, because everybody doesn't feel safe that Vince can tell you the truth and you can hold him to his word.
That's right. And hey, telling the truth and holding somebody to their word can be anything and everything, especially I feel like in the wrestling world. So with that, we get to the background where Bret is changing.
Yeah, Bret's in his locker room, and Bret, like I mentioned previously, Bruce Pritchard or Jim Cornette convince Vince to go out there and apologize and tell him that that was not how they had worked out. He doesn't know what's happening. And Bret hears Vince come to his locker room, and he tells Vince, "Hey, if you don't leave my locker room by the time I'm done taking the shower, I'm gonna belt you."
Yeah.
And
not in a good way.
Yeah.
Not like I'm gonna give you a belt. Oh, like I'm gonna belt you.
Yeah, I'm gonna punch you out. And Vince, to his credit, and like I said, it could all be a work, but the documentary people that were with Vince was Bret at the time, for his documentary that was out there going on at the time, actually catches Vince limping after he leaves Bret Hart's locker room. It is said that Vince stayed, he waited for Bret, and he took an uppercut punch. During that uppercut punch, when Vince is landing, I believe he might have twisted his ankle coming down on Gerald Briscoe, because Briscoe or Patterson was they were both there. So when Vince is falling down, he might have twisted his ankle, and that's why we see him. Remember, I told you that
he was limping.
He was limping his way out.
Definitely limping on his way out. Yeah. Which I'm like, hey, what do they say? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. And it looks like he got wrecked when he went to go apologize.
Yeah. So.
Woo. So with that, the Montreal Screw Job marks a crazy chapter.
And the beginning of like not a feeling, but like I feel like an accelerant. Like it propels more of the Attitude Era more into the forefront, because now it's got everyone talking.
Right.
Like not only people in the wrestling business, but like people in the news, like asking, hey, was this actually like a wrestling story, or is this when it's breaking the fourth wall and where actual tempers and like miscommunication or like backstabbing actually comes through?
And then I kind of like that piece, like, let's take the terrible out of it. Like, I would love to know that this is part of the kayfabe. This is part of this is like the ultimate
So
storyline.
you wanna believe that this was all a work, that this
Um,
was like all premeditated and planned by various people, Vince, Bret, Shawn, Earl. eh,
wouldn't it be like the best of magic tricks, the
Oh
best
man.
illusion?
Yeah.
Something that you were like mind blown that this was all orchestrated and we all have been talking about this. I mean, it remains one of the most debated and discussed events in the industry.
And you weren't aware of it. So now that you've heard about it, how do you feel about adding this as part of your wrestling knowledge now?
I love it. I love knowing one, the history between I love knowing the history behind Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. I'm a fan of both of these wrestlers. I usually lean more towards Bret. Um and I like to see them wrestle. We've seen them wrestle before. I really enjoy watching them. Like you said, they both have really good chemistry. They're both really good wrestlers. They have their own unique style. But after seeing this, I'm like, shit, you know? I mean, and what we see is that this is part of real life. These are people that are working. You do have situations like this that are
Yeah,
happening. That championships and belts are important to them.
yeah.
Sometimes you want to win and you don't want to go out with a loss. So, I really enjoyed watching this, seeing it, and reading about the history of this match. What about you?
Yeah, this is like one of these things where I wanted to get to this for you eventually,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to just like introduce it to you like right away. Like there's lots of things that we probably could have skipped over,
Right,
but when I brought this up to you when we were like talking about how much you enjoyed watching wrestling in person at Warrior Wrestling back in February
right.
of this year, um, I wanted you to kind of have like the same journey I had, where it's like watching these WrestleManias, because at that point in time, that was, even though I did get to watch a couple of Royal Rumbles, Survivor Series, and SummerSlams,
Hmm.
they weren't always the ones I got to watch.
Okay.
It was always for sure WrestleMania.
Mm.
So, and it's made me a fan of not only the WWF but anything. Like if I see an interesting worker, character, or anything like that, I always try to make my way, like try to find it. And it's been a little bit easier now with internet and things like that. Like, and there was probably like other fans out there that have been watching it for as long as me, but had more insider knowledge because they were able to get to information faster or a little bit more.
And you remember way back when we were growing up, the way that you found out about either like your favorite musicians
Hmm.
or your favorite artists, or for us, it was always like breakdancing or hip hop or
Yeah,
graffiti. We were on the streets, going to
yeah.
different stores, picking up cassettes, sharing cassettes with our friends.
Hmm.
For you that are really young, picking up magazines, reading
Yeah,
through our magazines to read about all of our favorites.
yeah.
So, with that said,
Would you recommend that someone that is new to watching wrestling see the Montreal Screw Job, not only the match, but like anything else involving that particular?
I would, but what I recommend to you is that if you have not watched these two wrestlers wrestle before, watch them before this match, see how they wrestle, appreciate their techniques, appreciate their history, and then as a wrap up to watch this. Because had I watched this before I watched your wrestling, I don't know what my opinion would have
Yeah.
been, or how I would have felt about that or the industry. So I would say watch a couple of matches, see how they wrestle, watch your technique, and then watch this as a finale if you haven't watched it already.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this serves as a stark reminder of the complexities and conflicts of wrestling.
Right. And a few more things, a little bit of housekeeping before we
Whoop.
go. In the United States, we're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Our next show won't be coming out until the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So to those all who watch us and celebrate, have a safe and happy Thanksgiving holiday. And
those that are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, we celebrate you too.
right. And then we have one last thing of note to commemorate the ending of this particular event or bonus episode. If you watch our next show that's coming out November 25th at 6 p.m. Central, we will, and you comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be drawing for somebody to win this WrestleMania moment Funko of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels squaring off at WrestleMania 12 for the Iron Man match. This is only available to our subscribers within the continental United States, with the obviously. So please give a like, share, subscribe, and comment on our next one. And anything else before you go?
Well, if you've got the confidence and the work ethic, you can make any dream come true. Bret Hart.
All right.